Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my channel? Thank you so much. Mail order bride rejected for her foreign accent until a lonely Texas rancher called her his angel. Dust Hollow, Texas, autumn of 1884. The train's whistle pierced the dry afternoon air, startling a group of sparrows from the telegraph wire. Dust spun in slow circles as the iron beast screeched to a halt at the station, its final breath a plume of steam that curled into the pale sky. From the second passenger car, a woman stepped down carefully, her worn leather boots landing on the weathered planks of the platform. She carried a small cracked suitcase and clutched a folded letter tightly in her gloved hand. Her name was Anya, pale-skinned with dark hair braided neatly and pinned under a modest gray bonnet. The lace around her throat had yellowed slightly, and her coat, though once elegant, bore the signs of many hard miles. She scanned the crowd, her eyes flickering with quiet hope. Two horses trotted into the station yard, drawing a gleaming black carriage. A well-dressed woman in a stiff maroon gown stepped out first, followed by her husband and their son, a young man in a tailored brown vest and slicked hair, fidgeting with his gloves. Anya's eyes lit up. She recognized the young man from the photograph he had mailed her. "Miss Anna?" the older woman asked sharply, glancing her up and down. Anya stepped forward, offering a gentle smile and a slight curtsy. "Yes, I am Anna Ivanovna," she said, her voice soft, accented, deliberate. The woman's expression shifted, subtle at first, a tightening around the eyes, the corners of her mouth tugging downward. "You speak like that?" the young man asked, taking a step back. "Lord, I thought you were well, Canadian or something." I learn English," Anya said, the words thick but intelligible from letters and school. "Little." His mother folded her arms. "We were expecting someone with proper speech. My son cannot present a wife who sounds like a kitchen maid from the old country." Anya blinked. "But your letters, you say you want a woman honest, kind." The father gave a cold snort. "We did not realize honest would come wrapped in that voice or that name." The young man shifted uncomfortably. I did not know. You look fine, but I cannot. This is not what I expected." She felt something twist in her chest, slow and sharp. "I travel many days. I leave family. I hope for new life." The mother scoffed. "We don't owe you anything, girl. You came on your own accord." Anya opened her mouth, but no sound came. The boy looked down at the ground. I am sorry," he muttered. The father turned. "Come along, Michael. We're done here." They walked away. The sound of the carriage wheels grinding against gravel echoed louder than the train's whistle. Anya stood alone on the platform. The crowd, mostly townsfolk, had paused in their movements. Some stared, others whispered. She felt their eyes press into her like nails, not just because of her accent but because she was now a spectacle, a foreign bride rejected at the altar of American pride. The wind picked up. A soft rain began to fall, just enough to dampen. In her hair and blur the ink on the letter still clenched in her hand, her suitcase slipped from her grasp and landed with a hollow thud on the boards. She knelt down, slowly picked it up, and stood again. A child tugged at his mother's skirt. "Why is she all alone?" His mother pulled him close, whispering something Anna could not hear. She stood still for a long moment. Then, as if waking from a trance, she walked toward the edge of the station, not with haste or panic, but with the quiet dignity of someone used to being overlooked yet never broken. The rain thickened slightly. Anya pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, turned toward the open road beyond the tracks, and took her first step into Dust Hollow, a place where she was supposed to become someone's wife. Now she was not even someone's memory. Behind her, the letter slipped from her fingers. It drifted down, landing in a shallow puddle where the words bled slowly like a wound that could not be stitched. The wind curled around the edges of Dust Hollow's empty main street, kicking dust and drizzle through the wooden slats of storefronts. Evening had begun its slow descent, and the clouds above held a grayness that warned of colder nights to come. Caleb Morgan tied his horse outside the general store, tugging the brim of his hat down against the rain. He had come to town for two things: salt blocks for the cattle and molasses for himself. He rarely stayed long. Crowds made him itch, conversations made him tired, and since his older brother died of fever the year before, leaving him sole caretaker of the Morgan Ranch, Caleb had kept mostly to himself. He had just loaded a sack of flour into his wagon when he saw her. She was standing near the water trough by the station, soaked to the bone, her coat clinging to her frame. The gray bonnet on her head was lopsided now, hair dripping beneath it. She held a suitcase in one hand and nothing in the other. No umbrella, no shelter. Her eyes were fixed on nothing, wide and hollow like someone who had been emptied out from the inside. Caleb paused. He did not know her name, but he had heard whispers in the store earlier. Something about a mail-order bride rejected for her foreign voice. He had not cared to listen at the time. Now, seeing her, something stirred. Not pity, not attraction, something quieter, something like recognition. He approached slowly, boots thudding softly on the muddy ground. "Ma'am," he said, voice deep and even. She turned, startled. Her eyes were a strange storm gray, like a lake just before it froze. "You got a place to go?" he asked. She hesitated, then shook her head once, almost imperceptibly. Caleb looked her over, then shrugged off his oilskin coat, thickly lined with fur, worn but warm, and held it out to her. She did not move. "It's dry," he said simply. "Take it." Anna looked at him, searching for insult, for expectation, for some threat of cruelty she could name. She found none, only quiet eyes under a weathered hat and a hand not withdrawn. She took the coat with trembling. "Fingers bread," he added, pulling a small cloth bundle from his saddlebag. "Not much, but it'll do till morning." She nodded in thanks, her voice too brittle for words. Caleb gestured toward his wagon. "I'll take you out to my place. It's not far. You can warm up, just until you figure out your next move." I do not want trouble," she managed, her accent curling around each word. "Then it's settled," Caleb said. "Neither do I." He helped her into the wagon, adjusting the tarp over the supplies to shield her from the rain. She sat stiffly, hands wrapped around the bread she did not eat. Caleb said nothing more. He guided the horse through the muddy road and out of town, past the swaying cottonwoods and into the open scrubland where his ranch waited. The Morgan house stood on a rise above the creek, a two-room structure with a wide porch and a red barn tilting slightly from last year's windstorm. He pulled up beside the porch, hopped down, and helped her from the wagon. "Inside," he said. She obeyed. The room smelled of cedar and saddle oil. A small fire still crackled in the hearth. Caleb pointed to the table. "Sit." He went to the stove, poured water into a kettle, and set it to heat. She sat rigid in the chair, eyes flicking around, not in judgment but in disbelief. This was more welcome than she had expected. "I'll make you tea," he said. She nodded. He disappeared down the short hall and returned a few moments later with a dry wool blanket and a pair of clean socks, much too big but clean. "I'll be outside tending the barn," he added. "You'll be safe here." When she looked up to thank him, he was already gone. Later that night, Anna heard soft footsteps outside her door. She waited, breath held. No knock came, just the faint sound of something being placed gently on the floor. She opened the door and found a metal basin of steaming water, folded towels, and a small card written in uneven but careful script. She held it up to the candlelight and read, not out of pity. "Anyone who stands in the rain and stays standing deserves a roof." She pressed the card to her chest and closed the door. Mornings on the Morgan Ranch came quietly. The rooster did not crow so much as grumble, and the wind through the cottonwoods made more noise than the man who owned the land. Caleb rose early as always, but now when he walked past the kitchen, there was a soft clatter of movement already in motion. Anna had begun to cook. She moved with a kind of cautious grace, learning where everything was without asking. She scrubbed the counters, wiped the windows, and folded dish towels with military precision. She said little, but her presence filled the small house like a faint melody, not loud but lingering. Caleb never asked her to do any of it. He just nodded when she offered food or handed him coffee. And every afternoon, while she swept the porch or baked cornbread, he slipped out with hammer and nails, climbing the roof to reshingle the leafy corner, oiling the old hinges on the barn doors, replacing the loose SL. He never mentioned it. She never asked. One night, just after supper, Anna tried to carry the wash basin to the back room. Her hand slipped. The ceramic cup tumbled and shattered on the floor. "I am sorry," she stammered, crouching to pick up the pieces. I am not used to American dishes, they're too slippery." Caleb knelt beside her and swept the fragments into his calloused hand. "It is just a cup." She looked away, ashamed. "Back home, we have only tin and wood. But I dropped those too." He chuckled, a warm, quiet sound. "English does not make the person. Actions do." She looked up at him, then really looked, and saw a softness in his face she had not noticed before. Not pity, not charm, just the stillness of a man who had known silence long enough to respect it. The next morning, Caleb saddled 2 horses and called to her from the porch. "Come on," he said. "You need air." Anna stepped outside, pulling her shawl tight. "Where?" "To see the herd." She hesitated, then followed him to the corral. He handed her the reins to his own horse, the larger, gentler one, and climbed up on the second. "You ride before?" "Yes," she said, smiling slightly. "My uncle had cart horses, very stubborn. They all are." They rode quietly across the pasture, the morning sun cutting through low mist. Caleb pointed out the calves, explained how to watch for sickness in their eyes, and showed her the route the cattle took to the southern field when the rains came. Anna listened, nodding, her hands steady on the reins. She looked freer in the saddle than she ever did inside the house. Later, at the fence line, she dismounted and picked a few sprigs of prairie sage for tea, she said. Caleb nodded. They sat on a fallen log, drinking from the flask he carried. The wind tugged gently at her bonnet. "Your land is big," she murmured. "Like the sky has no walls." Caleb tilted his head. "I guess so. Never thought of it that way." "In my home," she said slowly, the sky felt close, like something could fall from it. He did not press her. He just handed her the last piece of jerky. That evening, as the stew simmered on the stove, Anna stirred the pot slowly, her eyes unfocused. Caleb sat nearby, polishing his saddle straps. She broke the silence, her voice low. "Before the war, I was a music teacher. Piano, little children." Caleb glanced up. "But when the war came," she continued, "they took piano from school, then from church, then from homes." She paused. "They took voices next. Men gone. Women quiet. Songs became dangerous." Caleb set down the leather strap. "You do not have to tell me." "I want to," she said. She turned from the pot and faced him fully. "Music was my way to speak. Without it, I did not know who I was anymore." Caleb met her gaze. "You still have a voice. You just need a place safe enough to use it." Her throat tightened, but she nodded. Later that night, as she washed the dishes and he carved a new gate latch in the barn, they said nothing more. But when she dried the last bowl, she noticed a small wooden carving sitting by the windowsill, a treble clef etched from cedar left without a note. She touched it with reverence, then placed it beside her cup. It was not a piano, but it was music just the same. It began with the sound of hooves, well-fed, well-groomed, and altogether out of place on the dusty road leading to the Morgan ranch. Anya saw the carriage first, its wheels too polished, its trim too gold. Dust Hollow did not carry itself with gold. The same family who had turned their backs on her weeks ago now approached with fanfare and feigned civility. The mother wore a hat that screamed Sunday pride, though it was only Thursday. The father carried a cane he did not need, and the son, Michael, wore a velvet vest and a smile that trembled beneath its own weight. They dismounted awkwardly near the porch. Caleb, chopping firewood at the side of the barn, looked up, wiped his brow, and said nothing. Anna stood in the doorway, her hands drying from the dishwater, eyes narrowing. "Miss Ivanovna," Michael said, approaching with a bouquet of irises, bright but wilting in the sun. "May I speak with you?" She did not answer at first. The mother jumped in, "We've had time to think, and well, we believe things may have been rushed, misunderstood." Anya blinked slowly. "Misunderstood?" Michael cleared his throat. "I made a mistake. I was caught off guard. But now, with all this town gossip and my name on everyone's lips, it has become clear we might both benefit from doing what we originally planned." He motioned toward the carriage, where a small chest sat glinting. "There is a proper dowry, rings, even a dress if you like. And I can speak with the pastor about scheduling." "I am not interested," Anna said quietly. Michael's face faltered. "Why not? You would be comfortable, respected. You'd live in town, not out here with Kettle." "She doesn't need comfort from a coward," Caleb said, walking up behind her, his tone even but hard. Michael flushed. "I was talking to her, not her host." Anya stepped forward. "You left me in the rain. You said nothing. Now you come back because your name is bruised, not your heart." "I made a mistake," he snapped. "You talk like you're some kind of queen now. You're still foreign, still hard to understand. Do not think one cowboy's pity makes you more than that." Caleb tensed but said nothing. The father interjected, "Let's not raise voices. We came here with a generous offer." "I am not for sale," Anna replied, eyes burning now. "And my voice, my accent, it is mine. It is from where I lived and what I survived. I will not erase it for your comfort." Michael sneered, "Then rot in this shack with your hay and your mud." The mother gasped, but Anna did not flinch. She simply turned and walked inside, leaving the door open behind her. The family hesitated, then turned back toward their carriage, voices rising with hasty indignation. Caleb said nothing, just watched them ride away until the dust swallowed their wheels. That night, Anna found something on the kitchen table. It was a small folded note tucked beside the bread she had baked that morning. The handwriting was rough, uneven. Tears slanted like they had wrestled their way onto the page. She opened it and read, "I don't buy anyone, but if someone stays because they choose to, I will plant flowers across this whole land for them." Her hands trembled, but she smiled. Later, she found Caleb in the barn mending a broken gate latch. "I saw your letter," she said softly. He nodded once, not looking up. "I wanted you to know," she continued, stepping closer, "that I'm not here because I need safety or bread or even kindness." He stood and finally met her eyes. "I'm here because I am choosing to be." She took his hand, rough and calloused, smelling of cedar and sweat, and held it tightly. "I returned their money," she added. "The gifts, even the bouquet. I gave it to the church for someone who really needs it." Caleb nodded again. "They don't understand," Anna said. "I am not a product, and my voice does not need fixing to be heard." "You do not need to change," Caleb said, voice low. "No," she agreed, squeezing his hand. "But I think maybe together we both will grow." Neither of them said another word. But that night, when Anna passed through the kitchen to extinguish the lantern, she saw an old flower pot on the windowsill, one she had thought too cracked to hold anything. Inside, fresh soil had been packed, and a single wildflower swayed gently from the breeze that slipped through the open pane. The days grew longer, the wind warmer. Spring crept in slowly, teasing color back into the fields and coaxing life from the branches. It was the season of return, and for Anna, it became the season of beginning. Word spread quietly through Dust Hollow. The foreign woman at the Morgan Ranch could play music. Not just play, but teach. And for the first time, families who had once watched her with suspicion began sending their children to her with hesitant smiles and small coin pouches. Anna never charged more than a nickel. Some weeks, she charged nothing at all. On Tuesday mornings, the Morgan home filled with clumsy melodies, scales, broken chords, offbeat rhythms, and the soft encouragement of a woman who had once taught war-torn children in a country far away. She sat beside each child with patience and the kind of gentleness that had long been starved from her own life. The children adored her. They mimicked her accent fondly, not mockingly. They learned her favorite lullabies and asked her what home looked like. She taught them to listen with their hearts, not just their ears. And always outside the door, Caleb listened too. He never joined the lessons, but each time a child arrived, he fed the horses first so the barn stayed quiet. He fixed the gate so the latch would not slam. He trimmed the porch planks so they would not creak under small feet. It was his music in its own way. One evening, after the last student had gone, Anna sat in the silence and stared at her hands. They were tired, red at the knuckles, stained slightly from onion skin and garden soil. But they had made music again. She did not hear Caleb approach. He placed something beside her gently. A worn but still tuned upright piano bench. The keys slightly yellowed but intact. It had clearly been used, but carefully, reverently. "I borrowed it from the church," he said. "Figured it was lonely in there, just gathering dust." Anya touched the wood with trembling fingers. "You brought this for me?" "I do not play," Caleb said, shrugging. "But I know when someone needs to be heard." Anna swallowed hard. "Thank you. This is more than a gift." "Then make it count." She sat down and tested a few notes. The sound was uneven, some keys softer than others, but it sang softly as if it remembered her. Caleb stood behind her, hands in his pockets. She began to play. Not a song from a book, but something new, something just forming, a gentle, hesitant melody, notes that rose and fell like breath. Caleb listened, head bowed. The song did not speak of loss or war or exile. It spoke of mornings filled with wood smoke, of children's laughter, of a man who built silence not out of fear but out of care. It spoke of second chances that did not need to be declared, only chosen. When the final note faded, she turned to him. "I call it sincerity," she said. Caleb nodded, eyes unreadable but soft. "It's not perfect," she added. "Neither are we," he replied. They sat in quiet a while longer, the setting sun casting gold across the floorboards. Outside, the horses stirred, and somewhere in the distance, the first frogs of spring began to sing. It was not a symphony, but it was enough. The Dust Hollow Harvest Festival was the town's proudest evening. Long tables of roasted corn, pumpkin pie, jars of cider and whiskey, and a fiddler on every corner. Bunting hung from porch beams. Children chased one another between hay bales, and the air smelled of cinnamon, pine, and old stories. Anna wore a simple cotton dress dyed soft blue, her hair loosely braided. She had not intended to come, but Caleb asked her once, quiet and without pressure. "You don't have to," he said, "but I wouldn't mind showing you off," so she came. At first, everything was fine. Several townspeople nodded her way, small acknowledgments that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. The schoolteacher thanked her for helping the children. The pastor's wife complimented her cooking. Caleb stayed by her side, occasionally refilling her cider and always watching the room. But then the Carters arrived. Michael Carter, the man who once cast her aside in the rain, now strutted through the hall with whiskey in hand and bitterness in his eyes. His parents trailed behind, strained smiles in place as if trying to forget they had ever humiliated someone who now stood in the favor of the town. Michael spotted her instantly. "Well, if it ain't the accent herself," he called across the floor. "Didn't know the town allowed music teachers with imported tongues." Anna's smile froze. Caleb stepped closer. Michael approached, weaving slightly from drink. "What's the matter, sugar? You don't like whiskey now? Or is that not something you people drink?" A few heads turned. Conversations quieted. Anna held her ground, voice steady. "I prefer what I can taste." Michael grinned. "Bet you preferred what Caleb gave you too, huh? Is that what gets you ladies from over the sea? A warm bed and a cowboy's name?" Caleb moved to step between them. Michael raised his cup mockingly. "What's the deal, Morgan? You betting her for music lessons? Heard the foreign ones get clingy, especially when they can't talk proper." The room went silent. Caleb's jaw tightened. He looked at Michael once, just once, then struck. The punch landed clean, snapping Michael's head back and sending him sprawling into a table of pumpkin bread. Plates crashed. Someone gasped. Whiskey slushed across the floor. For a moment, no one moved. Then murmurs swept the crowd like wildfire. Michael groaned on the floor, clutching his jaw. Caleb straightened, fists still clenched, breathing slow. He turned, took Anna's hand, and without a word, led her out of the hall. They walked in silence under the moonlight, past the laughter that resumed behind them, past the bonfire glowing in the field, past the town that had just witnessed something more honest than any hymn. When they reached the wooden fence beyond the road, Anna stopped. "Why?" she asked. He looked at her, dusted crumbs from his shirt, and said, "Because I don't let cowards talk like that. Not to anyone, especially not to you." She stared at him, something unspoken swelling in her chest. "I once stood on a train platform like a box with no address," she whispered. "I was not a bride, not a woman, not even a person." He said nothing. She stepped closer. "But tonight, when you stood up, not just in fists but in choice, I knew I wasn't something to be claimed anymore." Her hand found his, strong and warm. "I was something you wouldn't let go." He squeezed her hand in return, still quiet, but the truth burned in his eyes. The autumn wind passed over them, soft and rustling. Somewhere in the distance, the fiddler resumed playing a slow, mournful tune. Caleb and Anna stood in the dark field, no longer apart from the town but no longer needing it either. For in that night, with one punch and one truth, she had gone from unclaimed to chosen, not with vows, not with rings, but with action. And that, Anna thought, was worth more than any altar ever built. The wind shifted that night, dry, sharp, and mean. It moved like a whisper through the tall grass and danced too easily through the wooden slats of the barn. Anna was preparing tea when she smelled it, smoke, acrid and rising. By the time she reached the door, orange flickers lit the sky beyond the fields. Flames licked the edge of the barn roof, furious and fast. The horses inside kicked and neighed in terror. "Caleb," she screamed, her voice cracking into the night. He was already running, shirtless, barefoot, shovel in one hand, blanket in the other. "Stay back," he shouted, eyes blazing. "No, wait, please. Not alone." Anya begged. But he was gone, charging through the smoke, shouldering open the barn door with a grunt. Inside, the fire had spread along the hay bales, creeping toward the. She could see his silhouette as he threw the blanket over one colt, then another, leading them out with urgent whistles and calming hands. One horse kicked wildly. The beam above them cracked and gave way. Anya screamed, but Caleb dove forward, rolling both animals out just as the beam crashed behind him. Flames bit at his shoulder. He didn't stop. When the fire finally burned out, the barn's right wall had collapsed, and Caleb sat in the dirt, singed and bruised, breath ragged. Anna knelt beside him, tears streaking through the soot on her cheeks. His skin was red at the arms, blisters already forming near his collarbone. "You fool," she whispered. "You mad, stubborn man." But her hands cradled his face with infinite care. "I had to," he murmured. "They were yours too," he said. No more that night. For days, Caleb barely spoke. He worked the land slower than usual, his movements stiff and guarded. Every morning, Anna found him out by the barn with hammer and nails, patching the frame despite the pain in his arms. He refused help, refused rest. She left salve by his bedside, a warm cloth on the railing. He never acknowledged them, but they disappeared by morning. One evening after supper, Anna returned to her room to find something resting on her pillow. It was simple, a small band of metal shaped imperfectly but smoothly, warm from his hand. Not gold, not silver, just darkened iron twisted with care. Farm wire, but it fit her finger. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, watching the way it caught the last of the firelight. It was not store-bought. It had no stone, but it held more weight than any jewel ever could. No words had been spoken, no question asked, and still, it was the clearest answer she had ever received. At dawn, she walked to the porch where Caleb was already seated, sipping coffee and watching the morning sky turn from violet to gold. He looked up when he heard her steps. Then he saw it, the band on her hand. Anna sat beside him without a word. Their shoulders touched, and the silence between them was rich with meaning. The sun crested the hills. She leaned her head gently against his arm. "No one said anything," she whispered. Caleb nodded. "Didn't have to." And together, without promise or paper, they watched the day begin. By late spring, the Morgan Ranch had become more than a stretch of land. It was a place of music, of warmth, and quiet transformation. Children came each week with muddy boots and bright eyes, carrying sheet music and flowers from the fields. They no longer called Anna Mississippi or teacher. They called her Angel. It had started one day when a little girl, eyes wide with curiosity, whispered to her mother, "Is she really an angel?" Her mother, laughing, asked why. The girl answered, "Because Mr. Caleb said once that when she plays the piano, you don't feel afraid anymore." The name stuck, and Anna did not object because somewhere deep down, she knew what Caleb meant. One evening, she had been playing a soft tune on the borrowed piano, one hand moving through the melody was like drifting snow, the other wrapped in the hem of her apron. Caleb stood behind her, quiet as always. He leaned in, breath gentle on her ear, and said, "You don't need wings to make people feel peace." She had not turned around, but her hands had faltered briefly, just enough to let him know she had heard. Now even the town saw them differently. What began as whispers about the foreign woman with a funny accent and the reclusive cowboy who had never spoken more than a few words in a row became something else: admiration, respect. Together they had built a rhythm. Her music, his strength, her hope, his soil. When Dust Hollow held its first spring concert in the town square, the mayor himself asked Anna to open the evening. She wore a simple white dress, the iron ring still on her finger. Caleb stood behind the crowd, arms folded, hat low, watching with a stillness that was more than pride. It was reverence. Anna took the stage, sat at the piano, and looked at the faces before her. "I once believed I had to sound like everyone else to be loved," she began, voice firm but tender. "But someone once told me, you do not have to understand every word to know a heart." She paused, smiling toward the back of the crowd where Caleb stood. "This song is called To Be Seen. It is for anyone who has ever stayed silent too long." Her fingers touched the keys. The melody was rich and slow, like sunrise over open land. It did not ask for attention, it simply offered presence. Notes rose like breath, fell like rain, and carried no translation. Yet everyone understood. When she finished, the crowd stood in silence for a moment before erupting in applause. Later, beneath the strings of lanterns swaying in the breeze, Anna walked to Caleb, took his hand, and held it without urgency. I do not speak perfect, she said, eyes full of light. But I am here, and I am not leaving. Caleb looked down at her thumb brushing the back of her hand. That's all I need, he murmured. Enough to plant a garden around this old heart. She laughed softly, leaning into him. No vows, no altar, just two people, one who had been overlooked and one who had always watched, meeting where the world had tried to keep them apart. And in that place, love had quietly, surely taken root. And so, in the heart of Dust Hollow, where the wind still carried old songs and new promises, a woman once cast aside for her voice became the music of a man's soul. And a cowboy who rarely spoke taught the world that sometimes love does not need words, just presence, courage, and the willingness to stay. If this story moved you, let it live on. Subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more tales of untamed hearts, quiet heroes, and love that grows even in the hardest soil. Because out here in the wild and the real, where bullets miss, hearts never do.